Hello, everyone. I'm here to offer you a warm welcome to the inaugural episode of the That's DPI podcast. I am your host, Zach Berard, and I'm here with our co host, Tyler Kirkhart. And we're going to start with a little bit of background on the two of us before we jump into our main content for the day. Um, as for me, I currently work as a software engineer in the Kansas City area, but I have been a Detroit Lions fan for the last 15 years. I started in around 2010 when Calvin Johnson was just beginning his playing career with the Lions. I watched a highlight reel of his before my first middle school football practice and was enamored with his skill and his natural ability. Of course, I had none of this when I was playing in middle school, but I still made my number 81 all throughout my playing career. And once he retired prematurely, I latched onto the Detroit Lions. However unfortunate my fandom has been over the last 10 years, I'm happy that the Detroit Lions are giving me some football that I can watch here in the last couple of years. But we're really excited to bring you this first episode of the podcast. I'll pass it over to Tyler for his introduction.
What's up, guys? My name is Tyler Kirkhart. I'm a middle school teacher and coach in Eastern Kansas. I've been a lifelong football fan. I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. I've been going to games since well before the Mahomes and Andy Reid era. I've seen the good times. I've seen the bad times. Going to games with my dad. We've got season tickets, and I played football all throughout middle school and high school. I was not good enough to play at the higher levels, but I've picked up all of the information about the game at every single level, especially the NFL. I consider myself a rules expert, always listening to what the referee is saying and why the announcers are saying that that is or isn't a call. And that's really going to be what you can expect out of me on this podcast is a detailed look at officiating calls, along with other things going down with the NFL. Currently, we're going to be doing some off-season stuff right now. We're going to do a recap of the NFL season and then slowly get into the next football season from a very detailed and precise and informed look.
And that's a good segue into our first kind of introduction of the podcast as a whole. I mean, that's DPI, that's the name, but detailed, precise, and informed is what our acronym stands for. Obviously, it's a double entendre with defensive pass interference. But we're looking, Tyler and I have been debating sports together for the past like 3 years. And we just thought it was time that we share our opinions with the world in podcast form, as we tend to get very detailed and we both consider ourselves very informed. So we're looking to bring that to an off-season look and look at referee clips as Tyler breaks them down in the rules, take a holistic look at fantasy football and potentially how statistics can influence your decisions on whether to start and sit certain players, and other analysis related to the NFL season. So that's in a general way what we're going to do with this podcast. Obviously, this is the first episode, so we're going to cover a little bit of season recap today, and we'll begin with the awards. Our award winners recap. So we're going to begin with Coach of the Year, and this segment's going to go a little bit like this. We're going to explain who won the award, and then Tyler and I are both going to give our perspectives as to who we think should have won the award, and maybe spark a little bit of friendly debate. But our first award winner is Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell. So Tyler, if you want to go ahead and start with your opinions on the Coach of the Year winner and who you may have thought could have won.
I understand where Kevin O'Connell came from because the expectation for the Vikings were not there. So when you look at previous coach of the years, you're looking at the coach that exceeded the expectation. It really doesn't even matter who the best team was. It's did they exceed the expectations? Kevin O'Connell did do that. I struggle to say that he is the coach of the year though, because Kevin O'Connell, I think, got lucky with a fluke Sam Darnold year. Um, and a good tight knit defense, but I don't think Kevin O'Connell is the coach of the year.
Okay, then who do you think should be the Coach of the Year?
I struggle to say Dan Campbell. I know you're going to say Dan Campbell. I struggle to say Dan Campbell because the expectation was high and they met it. I struggle to say Andy Reid because the expectation was high and they met it. My coach of the year would have gone to Mike Tomlin. Bringing in two veteran quarterbacks that were really kind of at the bottom of the barrel, struggling to revise their career, and he still brought in an aging Russell Wilson and a malnourished Justin Fields, malnourished at the coaching advancements, I should say, and he made them good. The Steelers once again went above 500. They did a good year. I would have put Tomlin in.
Okay. So I agree with you in the sense that Kevin O'Connell does not deserve the coach of the year. Well, maybe he does deserve it, but I don't think he should have won. People on the internet have liked to say that the Vikings were in a rebuilding year, and I disagree with this. This roster won a significant amount of games just a couple of years ago. However, they did lose their starting quarterback, and that's a significant injury, and their starting left tackle. And so what Kevin O'Connell did was undoubtedly impressive. However, I think there are two coaches that likely deserved it more. Obviously, one of them is Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell beat Kevin O'Connell twice this year, once in convincing fashion with the number 1 seed on the line. I think that if you, as the coach of the year, if you lay an egg against your division rival and fall from the 1 seed to the 5th seed, that should disqualify you. However, I don't think that Dan Campbell should have won it, like you said, because of how the awards work. It's all about expectations. And the Lions were expected to win 13 games, and they won 15. Okay, that's a 2-win improvement. It's obviously extremely impressive what Dan Campbell has done with a historically terrible franchise. But the Lions the Lions expected to come in here and win, and the voters know that. So unless the Lions really went undefeated, I don't think that Dan Campbell was ever going to win it. And that's unfortunate for Dan. But if Dan was going to win it, it would have happened in one of his earlier seasons. I think that the real deserving winner is Dan Quinn for the Commanders. He took a rookie quarterback. He won a significant amount of games, beating the Philadelphia Eagles in a crucial game when playoff seeding was on the line, and took them to the playoffs. And obviously, the voting ends before the playoffs, but he took them past Detroit, and he took them to the NFC Championship game where some unlucky turnovers caused the game to become very lopsided very quickly. But Dan Quinn coming in, first-year head coach with the Commanders, at least, with a rookie quarterback and kind of a hodgepodge roster full of veterans that were signed off the street, like Bobby Wagner and some offensive lineman talent that they brought in, Zach Ertz being a key contributor that was a veteran free agent. I think Dan Quinn did the most with what he was given and exceeded expectations, because nobody expected a conference championship Washington Commanders team this year. And a lot of that was Dan Quinn and his preparation.
I do like that answer with Dan Quinn, especially with the conference that he's in. The expectation for the Cowboys was high. The expectation for the Eagles was high. The expectations for the Commanders and the Giants were extremely low. And we can break down what happened to the Cowboys later in different episodes, but people are looking at Dan Quinn to take it to come into a division that is the best in the NFL. That's the expectation going into this season, and doing what he did even before the playoffs with, like you said, pointing out a rookie quarterback and really doing well. They had a good schedule too. It's not like they were playing nobodies the whole season.
I agree. And so now I think with that breakdown, we can move on to our next award winner, and that's Assistant Coach of the Year. That was given to Ben Johnson of Detroit. So I'll go ahead and start with this one. I disagree with this one.
Oh,
I disagree. I think that he was not the best assistant coach on his team, and that would go to Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn dealt with 22 injuries on the defensive side, including both starting pass rushers. Actually, all 3 starting pass rushers, if you include Aleem McNeil, an interior guy who's a pass rush specialist there for the Detroit Lions. Starting cornerbacks, Amik Robertson and Carlton Davis both went down. Every single starting linebacker, minus Jack Campbell, went down with an injury. And a bunch of different rotational injuries throughout the season, and still got his team to 15-2. I think that a lot of that credit does go to Ben Johnson because the offense was humming, but it's all about expectations. Were the Lions offensively supposed to be good? Absolutely. They didn't lose any key players. They added a veteran in Kevin Zeitler, and Tim Patrick. They were supposed to be good. That Lions defense was atrocious last year defending the pass, and Aaron Glenn improved them while losing almost every starter in the front seven. I think that he was never going to win it because the voters don't see it that way. But with the injuries and the adversity faced, for the Lions defensively to still come out that good in the end, Aaron Glenn deserved it over Ben Johnson. And obviously, both of them got head coaching jobs, so the NFL values them very highly. But I do think Ben Johnson would have came in second. So somehow the Lions got two of the best coordinators underneath Dan Campbell this past season. But I'm curious your thoughts.
I think you put up the best argument you possibly could have for why Ben Johnson did not get it. And I think you put up the only other name that's acceptable to have gotten it over Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson really kept the Lions in the game all throughout the season. So, yes, the Lions defense had a ton of injuries, and he helped them get to 15-2. But Ben Johnson and the offense is why they got there. Game after game, the Lions offense is putting up just an enormous amount of offense, an enormous amount of points. And I think the offense is really kind of what carried the defense. I don't think it's the defense carrying the offense in Detroit. And
Sure.
I mean, you're the Lions expert. You can correct me on that. But I think the Lions offense was the talk of the town. And I don't think you can put anybody over Ben Johnson for assistant coach of the year.
And that's a fair point. My only counter argument to that, and I think that I think we have enough time for a counter argument here, is that when you look at the Lions offense, you mentioned it yourself, expectations are the key. Did the Lions significantly overperform their expectations this season enough for someone like Ben Johnson to win it? Because the Lions offense has been good, and they were really good last season. But the defense, for what they did and some of the metrics they were able to put up, they were still a top 10 defense for the vast majority of the season. And I don't think anybody expected that. And that's my point. Ben Johnson gets a lot of credit because there's some flashy trick plays in there. And playmakers like Jamison Williams really came into their own, 1,000-yard receiver. Nobody expected that this season. And so maybe that is Ben Johnson. Maybe that's Antoine Randall, their wide receivers coach, who worked very closely with Williams. But either way, Ben Johnson should get a lot of credit. And that's why he is second. And it's a close second to Aaron Glenn, who I do think will be an NFL head coach, a better NFL head coach than Ben Johnson. But we'll talk about that later in the show. So we can move on to.
That's fair. Yeah, I want to talk about the MVP, and then I want to quickly go through the rest of the list. The MVP is absolutely going to be the controversial topic
I agree.
of the NFL fandom. Going through the rest of the list, though, Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley, Defensive Player of the Year, Pat Surtain. Rookie of the Year is Jaden Daniels and Jared Verse, with Comeback Player of the Year being Joe Burrow. I personally don't disagree with anything on that list, but we can talk about the MVP because that's going to be the controversy of the NFL for the awards.
I agree. So do you want to go ahead and start? I started last time, so I'll let you go ahead and start this one.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen this year had an MVP season. I think Lamar Jackson this year had an MVP season. I think both of them had career years, and that's why it sucks that you had to pick somebody. Personally, I would have stuck with Allen. Allen did great, and I'm not discrediting anything that Lamar Jackson did, but Allen with a dual threat, just like Jackson, I understand the dual threat. It's one of those things that when you look at the stats, both of them had great MVP seasons. Seeing the Chiefs play both the Bills and the Ravens, I think Allen was a bigger threat against us. Obviously, he beat us in the regular season, unlike Jackson. And I'm not saying that the Chiefs games are the reason I'm putting Allen over, but just seeing what they did in those games against the Chiefs, Allen was just a better guy. Like, I don't know how to describe it because it's one of those things where stats is not going to be the determiner in this because both of them statistically have great players or have great players around them, great coaches around them, great stats, both rushing and passing. I just think Allen's more explosive. I just think he's better.
Shockingly, Tyler, I agree with you on this one, but I have a little bit of a different perspective maybe as to why I agree. I will bring up the stats just so that we know kind of the context of what we're talking about. Lamar Jackson had 41 passing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, total of 45. And Josh Allen had only 28 passing touchdowns, but 12 rushing touchdowns for a total of 40. So there's a 5 touchdown difference there. And then Lamar Jackson had nearly 1,000 rushing yards with 915, where Josh Allen had 531 rushing yards. And they were both pretty similar on passing yards. Allen with 3,700 and Lamar Jackson with 4,100. But here's why I think Allen should have won it and did deserve it over what undoubtedly was a better statistical season from Lamar Jackson. In almost every metric, you can point to the stats and say Lamar won it. Lamar deserved it statistically. But here's my thing. When you look at NFL history and you look at 3-time NFL MVP winners, and that's what Lamar Jackson would have been if he won this year, you see guys like Jim Brown, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Peyton Manning. Those guys all in their 3rd MVP season were either, number one, the clear-cut best player in the league, like there was no debating them, or they were not the best player in the league, but they raised the bar so much higher from their play before that they deserve the MVP. I don't think that Lamar Jackson raised the bar high enough. I think he's a 2-time MVP already. We know what to expect from him. He repeated that season again, but just the nature of the NFL, he didn't do enough to differentiate himself from his last 2 MVPs. He was also had a backfield that had one of the best running backs we've ever seen personally in this century, Derrick Henry, go for 1,900 yards and open up a lot of offensive production for him. And so I think those 2 factors are why the NFL voters made the decision they did to go with Josh Allen, who did have a better record, who did more with less. And so I'm going to agree with you, Tyler, on the MVP, but for a different reason.
To be a devil's advocate on this one, you admitted that Jackson had a better statistical season.
Mm-hmm.
So to those that are going to be in our comments that are saying it absolutely should have been Jackson, how do you measure who actually should win the MVP if stats isn't what matters? Because I also said stat isn't really what matters.
I think that's what makes the allure of the Heisman Trophy and the MVP so important, because if we just give the MVP to the guy with the best stats every year, I don't think that's how the NFL wants it. They want storylines and they want, production with less. They want guys who have their MVP moment. And I think Josh Allen's MVP moment came on the 4th down scramble versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Sorry, Tyler, to bring this up. In their regular season game to secure that 30-20 victory.
Touchdown run.
Mm-hmm. A 4th down, he escaped what almost any other quarterback in the NFL would have had been sacked or tackled short. Josh Allen scrambled not only for the 1st down, but for a touchdown. And it reminds me of RG3's Heisman moment. And I think that when you look at storylines and when you look at the roster construction, Josh Allen losing his number 1 receiver, whereas Lamar Jackson retained offensive weapons and gained Derrick Henry. It's tough to argue that the storyline was going to port in Lamar Jackson's way unless he raised the bar even more and had a Mahomes-style season, 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards, something along those lines. I never saw it happening because the storylines were always on Josh Allen's side, and that was just the reality of the situation. I'm also more of a statistics guy, and I think that Lamar Jackson's season was incredible, but the storylines were never on his side throughout the regular season, and so he was doomed.
We've been talking about Allen versus Jackson, and that makes sense, absolutely. But a name that we have not yet talked about that we're going to have to talk about a lot now is Saquon Barkley. Is there any shot at this point of a non-quarterback winning the MVP award if Saquon Barkley's not even in the top 2 right now?
I don't think so, and that could be a bold statement. But I think that the day of Barry Sanders or Adrian Peterson winning an NFL MVP, those are gone. The NFL and the media landscape has changed so much. quarterbacks are so important that I honestly hope that they change MVP to be a purely quarterback award, so we no longer have to talk about somebody else winning it, because truly the most valuable player could have been any number of players if we omitted quarterbacks. I think Saquon Barkley. I think if we wanted to go offensive lineman, we could have said someone like Penei Sewell. We could have gone many different ways in terms of NFL MVP, but I don't think we will see another non-quarterback win an MVP in our lifetimes unless it is a truly alien season, like LaDainian Tomlinson, for example.
Going down that list again, do you disagree with any of the other award winners such as Barkley, Offensive Player of the Year, Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year, Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Verse, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Burrow, Comeback Player of the Year? I know that's a long list right there, but do you disagree with any of those?
I don't. I think that all of those were probably the clear-cut choice. The only one that I may have disagreements with, and I'm trying to remove my bias as much as possible here, is Defensive Player of the Year. When you look at the season that Kirby Joseph had from the safety position, it's tough to argue why he didn't win it. 9 interceptions, league lead. He was also had a 90-plus Pro Football Focus grade for the season, a 91 overall grade. That was first of all safeties in the NFL. He was 13th in run defense grade, and he was the best coverage safety according to Pro Football Focus in the league with a 91.9 grade, 71 tackles, 9 picks. He had a phenomenal season, one of the best safety seasons we've seen since the likes of Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu were patrolling the center. But Pat Surtain, I think it is more difficult to be a corner at the level of Pat Surtain than it is to be a safety at the level of Kirby Joseph. And so I don't hate Pat Surtain winning that award. I do think that he had a really, really good season for an outside corner. I just think that there wasn't enough buzz around Kirby Joseph's 9 interception, number 1 first graded safety in the NFL season, because you've seen guys like Marcus Peters amass a crap ton of interceptions and not really play all that well outside of it, kind of a risk reward type deal. But not only was Kirby Joseph jumping passes, getting picks, he was outside of that, he was a really solid cover and run defense guy. I mean, I don't think you can do it better from the safety position, but it's just a shame that position doesn't get all the props that it deserves in terms of the voting at the end of the season. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
And I think media has a lot to do with it as well. I mean, we're seeing Jared Verse clips on Twitter week after week of him doing stuff. I didn't see a lot of Joseph clips, and I'm not saying he didn't do all of that stuff.
Defensive
but I
Player
think
of the
the
Year.
media absolutely has. The more media coverage you get, the more likely you are to get that award.
This is Defensive Player of the Year, not Defensive Rookie. Kirby Joseph is a 3-year veteran.
Oh, my apologies. But even then, though,
Surtain.
That still stands with Surtain, though. I'm seeing way more Surtain clips than I am with Joseph clips, and I still stand that I think the more media attention you get, the higher chance you have of getting that award. We saw the same thing with Allen as well. The media was giving Allen every single praise they possibly could. While with Jackson had to have an elite classic game to get any attention from the NFL media this year.
And that's why I don't hate the award. I think that Surtain's PR team was better than Kirby Joseph's, and that at the end of the day has more weight than I would prefer, but it's the reality of the situation. It's very similar to our debate about Allen versus Jackson. So I agree with you there. We can move on down the list to our Super Bowl recap. I don't know if you want to go ahead and start that. Has it been long enough? Can you discuss this game without?
Look, Andy Reid at the combine, because they asked Andy Reid what happened too. I mean, you're going to get that question. Andy Reid said it was a bad day to have a bad day. And really, that's what it is, though. I mean, when you look, the Eagles were also locked in. I have never seen a team more locked in than the Philadelphia Eagles. Right before kickoff, they interviewed Patrick Mahomes and Saquon Barkley. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Mahomes yawned during that interview right before kickoff. Do you remember that?
It may have happened, yeah. We were in the same room.
He looked tired, and Barkley looked locked in, and that played. I don't think – I mean, obviously the Chiefs played bad. I don't think there was anything crazy that happened. I think it really was it just happened to have been a bad day for the Chiefs. I also think, again, I think the revenge factor played a lot more into that game than people want to admit, especially on the Chiefs side. With the way Super Bowl 57 ended, with the controversial call, which should not have been controversial, but we'll dive into controversial calls later. The Eagles, with the slippery field, thinking that they played on a different field, and the holding call that they think should not have been a call because it was within the last 2 minutes. They feel like they were robbed in the last Super Bowl. And I think whether they should have or not, they used that bulletin board material all week and came out and just kicked our butts. They were ready for it, and we weren't.
And I tend to agree. Some fascinating stats that I wanted to share with the audience is that there were 45 dropbacks from Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and the Philadelphia Eagles blitzed on zero. Zero
I have seen
blitzes,
that. I have seen
which
that. And yet they
is
sacked him, what, 6 times?
I think that the sacks don't tell the full story. This game, this 2024 Super Bowl 59 versus the Eagles, was the second highest pressure rate Patrick Mahomes has ever faced in a game. The first being, I bet you can guess what the first is.
You said the highest pressure rate?
Highest pressure percentage that Mahomes has ever faced in a game.
The Super Bowl 55 is the only thing that really comes to my mind. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the numbers on those is 59 had a 53.3 pressure rate. So on more than half of his dropbacks, reminder, no blitzes. Mahomes was pressured 50% of the time. That means they had 7 guys in coverage every play, and 50% of the dropbacks were pressured. Mahomes had nothing he could do, and he played like he was pressured on 50% of his snaps, and there were 7 guys in coverage. His PFF grade for the first half was a 28. 28. It was one of
it was that high, to be honest. There was nothing good happening in that first half of the game.
The only reason it's that high is because there were a couple of drops that were not on Mahomes. If you can recall,
Gotcha.
Kelsey and Juju had some key drops in that first half, but
Hopkins had one as well. Hopkins had a big one.
Oh, yes. I don't know if that was in the first or second half, but yes, he did.
That was first half.
But Super Bowl 55, for context, the pressure rate there was 59.5. So nearly 60% of dropbacks Mahomes faced pressure. And thinking back on my recollection of that game, it sounds about right. That was brutal to watch.
55, I don't blame the O-line too. Well, I mean, obviously the O-line is to blame. But there were so many injuries late in the season to the offensive line. For example, Eric Fisher he tore his Achilles in the AFC Championship game, forcing a lot of other line shifts. So, I mean, there's an excuse to be made for Super Bowl 55. There is no excuse for the atrocities that occurred in New Orleans this year.
Yeah, and additionally, the storylines around 55 were dropped passes. I mean, the superhuman throw to the running back in the end zone that doinked off his face mask. I mean, even in the first quarter, Mahomes fired a dime down the field on the left sideline. I remember to Tyreek Hill, and it just couldn't haul it in. A pass that he typically does haul in.
It wasn't even that he couldn't haul it in; he dropped it.
Yeah, it just wasn't able to bring in a pass that he usually catches. Not that it was necessarily an easy catch by any means. He was leaping in the air, but I don't think the storylines were fully about the O-line like they are right now, especially because of the shifting the Chiefs had to do with Joe Thuney moving around a lot. He's a great offensive lineman and probably will be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think that he can play tackle at the level of a true NFL starter versus that Eagles front seven. They were just murderous. I mean, they didn't even have to blitz, so it's clear that they had a good plan going in. But I don't know
too, though. Like, it's not just the fact that the Chiefs choked. I have to give credit to the Eagles. They were dominant all throughout the season, all throughout the playoffs, and in the Super Bowl. AJ Brown went nuts that game. Obviously, the defensive line went nuts that game. Jalen Hurts did phenomenal. Hurts did have an interception to Cook in the first half of the game, but outside of that one play, Hurts and the rest of the Eagles played a flawless game.
I agree. From what I can remember, that interception was really the only bad play for Philadelphia in the first half.
The entire
Outside of
game.
that, they fully maximized every single opportunity they had. They hit all their blocks in the run game. They did not drop passes, and they were very, very smart in the way they played. So I agree with you. As much as the storyline is about the Chiefs being miserable, the Eagles did do a lot to justify how good they played, maximizing.
Given that, do you think the Chiefs' dynasty is over? What is their window like for going back to the Super Bowl? And same thing with the Eagles. What's their window look like?
So here's my thing with Philadelphia. They have 3 key free agents that they need to find a way to bring back. That's Milton Williams, an interior defensive lineman. They have Zach Bond, a linebacker, kind of an off-ball linebacker, and Josh Sweat, an edge rusher. So those are 3 key pieces to the Philadelphia defense. If they can find a way to bring those guys back, or maybe bring 2 of those guys back and find a cheaper replacement in the draft or free agency. Howie Roseman's a phenomenal GM in the NFL. I think that the Eagles aren't going anywhere if they can find a way to lock up some of those key pieces. I think the thing that holds the Philadelphia Eagles back is coaching. Nick Sirianni, I don't think is a top flight head coach in the NFL. I think he has great coordinators and a phenomenal roster, but head scratching decisions throughout the regular season open up questions. I mean, Nick Sirianni was on the hot seat at one point this season because of some head scratching decisions, and now he's a Super Bowl champion. So it's fascinating, his growth. I want to see him continue that before I can say that I'm confident in his ability to pilot the Eagles to another season and another flawless game like this. However, for Kansas City, recent developments here for them, they just assigned the franchise tag to Trey Smith, right guard,
Which tells me Smith's gone. Smith's not coming back next year. They're going to trade him. It's going to be a very L'Jarius Sneed type of trade. We're going to get a couple second-round picks out of him.
I think that it's going to be very difficult to trade Trey Smith just because and get second-round picks for him. I think teams now know how desperate Kansas City is to get rid of him, because if they don't, they have no cap room to sign anybody else. Even with the historic rise in the cap to $279 million, I don't think that they're going to be able to make many moves if they don't dish Smith soon. So I think teams may latch onto that, and Chiefs may get less of a return than many are expecting.
My counter to that is that while, yes, that they know that the Chiefs don't have the ability to re-sign Smith with the salary cap situation, the problem is hey, you, NFL team, need a guard. This is one of the best guards in the game. You, other NFL team, needs a guard. This is the best guards in the game. Which one of you two is going to put up the better capital to get him? Especially when we're talking about teams that are right on the brink of becoming good. They just need a couple pieces here and there to get over the hump. I think it's going to be a bidding war.
Okay. And I think that we will absolutely cover Trey Smith more in our free agency episode, which will be our next episode. But as far as the Chiefs dynasty goes, Nick Bolton likely not coming back. I don't think that they can re-sign him due to cap constraints. Justin Reed could be coming back, but I don't know if they have the cap to make the moves they need at receiver and at tackle. Ronnie Stanley is available from Baltimore, and I think the Chiefs should pursue him as heavily as they can because clearly the Chiefs' problem is on their offensive line, particularly the 2 outside guys. I think that an offensive tackle addition like Ronnie Stanley would be more valuable than an interior lineman, especially when they already have Leo Chenal, a middle linebacker who's played admirably behind Nick Bolton. And the Chiefs can find a safety in the draft. I have full confidence in that. The safeties and the combine look really, really talented. But I'm curious what you think the Chiefs are going to do with Reed, Bolton, and the tackle conundrum this offseason.
So
and
will
it allow their Super Bowl window to stay open, I guess is my follow-up.
Yes, how they handle that is going to affect their Super Bowl window. They need as much as they can to come back to have. I mean, with Patrick Mahomes, the window's open still. The window is fully open with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. But you also need a good defense, of course. I do think they're going to re-sign Nick Bolton. I think that's going to be like the big thing. Um, I think Nick Bolton is going to be the new Chris Jones when it comes to like the free agency thing. It's are they going to bring him back? Can they afford to bring him back? There's no way they can bring him back. I think we're going to find a way to bring him back. Justin Reed, 50-50, depending on the Nick Bolton situation. I think Nick Bolton needs to be priority number one for Kansas City. I think Justin Reed needs to be priority number two. If you can get those guys back, everything else is secondary. If you can only bring one of them back, I'm bringing back Bolton. And if you can only bring one of them back, then the money that you're saving, not really saving, but have left by not having Justin Reed come back, I think you need to bring back a couple of the wide receivers, such as Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's important to bring back. Or you go out, like you said, go out to free agency and get a tackle, because that is the weakest link at the offensive line. But ultimately, I don't like the dynasty is over talks, because the Chiefs are still fully capable of going back to the Super Bowl, because the last 3 years and 5 out of the last 6 years, there hasn't been an AFC team to stop us. And I think maybe Buffalo, maybe Baltimore, I think their windows are closing right now. I think they've got to figure something out to get over the hump. And I think their window's slowly closing.
I agree with you in the sense that because the Chiefs retained Steve Spagnuolo, Andy Reid, and Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce, those four, you can never count them out of the AFC playoff race, much less the AFC Super Bowl race. Until one of those pieces leaves, that's when we can start talking about Chiefs dynasty falling. Even though Travis Kelce is likely going to be not a main contributor, doesn't matter. That dude is going to make a play when it counts the most, even if he's playing 50% of the snaps. I believe that Mahomes and Travis's chemistry is what makes them so valuable, rather than Mahomes' amazing arm and Kelce's incredible hands and route running ability. So until one of those four pieces leaves, I have no doubt that the Chiefs will continue to win. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions a little bit. They are my team, and I do want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the Lions, number one, are in the middle of a Super Bowl window, or do you think that the loss of their coordinators kind of closes that a little bit? Because I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
I think their window's still open, but I don't want fans to expect another 15-2 season. They will digress a little bit. Not saying they won't win the division. I'm definitely not saying they won't make the playoffs or make a run in the playoffs, but I don't think they're going 15-2 next year. I think Ben Johnson losing, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, Dan Campbell's the play caller, correct?
No, Ben Johnson was the play caller.
Ben Johnson was the play caller. So I think that's going to be big. Now, I do think Dan Campbell as a play caller, or whoever they bring in as their offensive coordinator, will be fine. I think they still need, even if Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson had stayed, they need to find some pieces in free agency in the draft to get over the hump that they've been facing the last 2 years. I think they're gonna do not as good next year, but the window is still open as long as they get those pieces that they need on offense and defense to get over the hump and finally get, to quote you, the big game at the end of the season.
There we go. I agree with you in the sense that whoever's going to call the plays for the Lions offense is going to be fine. His name is John Morton. He was the pass game coordinator for the Denver Broncos. He also was with the Lions organization in 21. So he has experience with Dan Campbell's offense. He has experience with Jared Goff, more importantly. And I think that he will absolutely bring a lot of veteran perspective to the offensive coordinator position. And the defensive coordinator hire was from internally. It was Kelvin Shepard, former Detroit Lions linebacker, and now defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He is integral. The Lions linebacking core, I think, is the strength of their defense. And promoting Shepard makes a lot of sense. And then another key move that I wanted to highlight is the hiring of Casey Rogers, the D-line coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He coached guys like Vita Vea and other pass rushers, Shaq Barrett. So when you look at the hires the Lions have done, I don't think they could have atoned for the loss of two great coordinators who we both agree are 1 and 2 for the Assistant Coach of the Year awards. I don't think they could have atoned for it any better. And I think that the draft is key. This is Brad Holmes, the GM of the Detroit Lions, was quoted saying, "This draft is a turning point. If you nail this draft, I think the Lions get at least one championship. If you don't, I don't know if it happens because of how good the AFC is and how great the Eagles are. You really have to have a talented roster and coaching to beat Philadelphia and or Kansas City, whoever you will eventually face. I don't think that you can win the Super Bowl without beating one of those two teams. So I think that in order to do that, you need to make sure that those two things are taken care of. I wanted to just discuss the Commanders a little bit before we move on to ref calls. Do you think that they have a window for a Super Bowl? They obviously made it to a conference championship, but a lot of their pieces, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, they are aging. What do you make of them and their roster construction over the last year?
I don't think the Commanders have a window. I think their window is being installed, though. Daniels is the guy installing the windows. You need to get him the pieces to fulfill getting over that hump again. And I don't even want to say getting over the hump because it's not like they've been struggling recently in terms of getting into the play. Well, they've been struggling a lot recently, but they haven't been like struggling to get over the hump by any means. Daniels is going to be a generational guy. I think he's going to be extremely well. I think he's going to be very similar to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in terms of what they do to the franchise. If the Commanders want to succeed, they need to give Daniels everything he wants. Whatever Daniel wants in this draft, go get it for him. If Daniels wants a defense to help him out, go get a defense for him. If he wants a better receiver, go get the best receiver in the draft. That is what the Commanders need to win, is they need to look at Daniels like, what do you want? Do you want us to improve on defense? Do you want us to get a receiver? Do you want us to get a line? And you need to let Daniels run the show because that is the only reason they succeeded even a glimpse last year.
Gotcha. I agree with you that I don't think they have a window yet with teams like, and I know that the Commanders did just beat the Lions in the divisional round, but I think if the Lions go into the playoffs healthy next year, the only team that has a chance is Philadelphia, and that's barring another crazy run. I think the Commanders, they kind of sold out for success in this first year. They signed a lot of veterans. I highlight again, Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz, two extremely key contributors on both sides of the ball, are in their late 30s. They cannot.
They need to replace those guys before they're gone.
And then they drafted Ben Sinnott early from Kansas State, the tight end, and he didn't really blossom behind Zach Ertz. I would like to see more development of him, and I would like to see them address off-ball linebacker. I think that that's a position that's deep in the draft this year. So if the Commanders play their cards right, I think they need to repeat what they did this year for me to say they have a Super Bowl window, because sophomore slumps happen. We all saw what happened to C.J. Stroud this year. He was a shell of his rookie self throwing the football. So I agree with you. The window is still a couple of years away in terms of Super Bowl. I think that the Commanders ran into a Buccaneers team that had a lot of injuries, a Lions team that had a lot of injuries, and an Eagles team that shellacked them on their way to the inevitable Super Bowl. So I would like to see what happens in the sophomore season of Daniels before I declare a Commanders Super Bowl window. I don't like that term, but I think for this discussion right now, it's not open. There's more work to be done.
Go ahead.
Did you want to go ahead and move on to some ref calls of the season?
Yeah, real quick, right before we do that, though, some on the opposite ends, though, we've got a couple coaching changes in the NFL. Bears bringing in Johnson, Jets bringing in Glenn, the Lions guys. Cowboys got a guy that's never had head coaching experience. Raiders bringing in Pete Carroll. New England bringing in a couple. New Orleans also bringing in a guy. Who do you think is the best hire so far?
Aaron Glenn, and it's not particularly close. Look at the way he's already handled the Jets' dysfunctional organization. He comes in to an organization where the players rate Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, as an F. And I think nobody deserves that F more than Woody Johnson. He has been a meddling owner that doesn't particularly know football well enough to meddle in football. I don't necessarily like defending Jerry Jones, but Jerry Jones has more football knowledge when he gets involved with his team than Woody Johnson does. At least the Dallas Cowboys have had regular season success over the past 20 years. Woody Johnson, there's a fluke AFC championship run with Mark Sanchez. That's it. I don't think that he has been a great owner. But Aaron Glenn, in his first week as head coach of the Jets, immediately dismissed the idea of bringing Aaron Rodgers back. I think that's a slam dunk decision. You don't want a 41-year-old quarterback coming off a mediocre season and a serious Achilles injury with a lot of controversy in the locker room. That's a recipe for disaster for a head coach. It got Robert Saleh fired. So Aaron Glenn is already starting off better than previous Jets hires. And I think that as a leader, nobody is better in that group of people. Kellen Moore, Brian Schottenheimer, Ben Johnson, nobody is more effective as a leader than Aaron Glenn is. So that's my slam dunk hire from the group. A+.
You and I are going to repeat our assistant coach of the year debate. I think it's Ben Johnson. Not discrediting anything against Aaron Glenn, but I think Ben Johnson's going into the best situation. I think the Bears have finally figured out that we need to actually go get a good coach and not just the guy that's had glimpses of success. Ben Johnson was the number one guy up for becoming a head coach this year. The Bears went and got him. They've got their young quarterback. They've got their young coach now. I think if you let Ben Johnson do what he wants to do and work with Caleb Williams, and if McCaskey can just step back a little bit and let Johnson and Williams do their thing and build around those two guys, Bears are going to be good. And I know it's a weird thing to say that the Bears are going to be good, but I think they finally got their coach and quarterback.
Well, people forget that they were 4-2 last season with Matt Eberflus and rookie Williams, who was not necessarily playing well. That defense is nothing to scoff at. However,
the way they were losing those games, though, they could have very easily been a 500 team with Matt Eberflus.
I agree. I agree. And that Hail Mary against the Commanders, I think it was a turning point for both of those teams. The Commanders really took off from that Hail Mary, and the Bears had a historic collapse after that Hail Mary.
Absolutely.
So I do think that Ben Johnson will succeed. However, I think if Ben Johnson is ever going to take Chicago to the heights of a team like Washington or a team like Detroit, is Caleb Williams the guy? He clearly has a bunch of talent. But the difference between there's two differences between Williams and Johnson and Goff. Ben Johnson's former quarterback that's Caleb Williams' mobility. He has a clear advantage over Jared Goff. He can create plays similarly to how Patrick Mahomes does. I wouldn't say he's like a mobile quarterback like Lamar is, but he's a scrambling and outside, out of frame playmaker like Patrick Mahomes is, and he has that ability. But the reason that Ben Johnson was so successful in Detroit is because he was coaching one of the smartest pre-snap quarterbacks in the league, and that's Jared Goff. His ability to diagnose defenses was Tom Brady-esque, and I don't say that. Tom Brady said that on his many broadcasts on Fox this past season about Jared Goff. He saw himself in the way to diagnose the play. So if Caleb Williams could get smart pre-snap and use that off-platform ability, the Bears will have a lot of good years, a lot of fun years ahead of them with Ben Johnson as their head coach. But I do think that Aaron Glenn is still a better hire because there's still some questions about Caleb Williams' ability to be the quarterback that Ben Johnson needs to run such a complicated and successful offense.
There's a lot going down in Detroit and coming out of Detroit. Last year's Detroit team is going to shape the face of the NFL going forward one way or the other with Glenn, Johnson, and Campbell splitting the field. That's going to be a historic coaching room for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into, I want to share with you guys my top 5 most controversial officiating calls of last season. It was a big year for officials. It was a bad year for officials. It was a good year for certain teams with officials. And let's break some down. So my number 5 is going to be Chiefs versus Texans. It's a helmet-to-helmet against Patrick Mahomes. So what we're going to do here when we do this is I'm going to break down the clip. I'm going to tell you why it was called, and then also whether I think it was correct or not. So right here, we have a Texans helmet to helmet against Patrick Mahomes. This first angle right here is from the ref's point of view. Go ahead and play that. And you see right off the bat, you see the helmet is high. And on this angle right here, you see that side angle. Go ahead and pause it right there. So right off the bat, we see a helmet to helmet contact. The rule says that any contact to the head or neck area is a roughing the passer. Right here, you see there is a hit to Patrick Mahomes's head or neck area. This is a textbook roughing the passer call. Fans can complain about the rule, saying, "Wow, that's just a high hit. That shouldn't be that." That's fine. We can debate that all we want. But under the rule, that is a helmet to helmet contact. That's number 5. Chiefs go on to win this game. Going on to number 4, we're going to stick with the Chiefs. It was a very controversial year for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a no-call pass interference against Byron Cook towards the end of the Chiefs-Falcons game. Now, go ahead and pause it right there real quick. As we see defensive pass interference being called or not called, you can have contact against the defender as long as they are making a play on the ball. And so, what I want to look at here, there's got to be contact. We see tons of contact. What I want to break down is, do we see Cook making a play on the ball? Go ahead and play that clip again. So, in this first angle, and especially this angle, we see that Byron Cook does not turn his head. He does not look at the ball. I think this is pass interference, 100%. The refs missed the call. I hate to go against the Chiefs in the calls here, but I don't think this is something that they should have let go. I don't want to get into the situation aspect of should they make a call, should they not make a call based on the situation, but at no point does Cook turn his head. We see him grab Kyle Pitts way before the ball gets there. This is textbook DPI. That's DPI right there. And I think they should have called. I'm not going to say that the Falcons lost the game on this call, because later on in the quarter, they had the ability, they had the ball in the red zone. The Chiefs made a stand without any controversial calls. But on this particular call, that's DPI.
Additionally, they also had another down after this one. This was 3rd and 5. So not a game-losing call, but a definitely crucial incorrect call late in the ball game on Kyle Pitts, especially since I had him on my fantasy team last year, and that was really unfortunate. But we can move on to clip number 3. This one is fascinating.
Would have given the Falcons, it would have given the Falcons 1st and goal at the 1, and that's really why people are saying this. Number 3, this is a roughing, or excuse me, not roughing the passer. This is an unnecessary roughness call against the Chargers, and it put Arizona in a situation to go on and win the game. So go ahead and play this clip, and I just want to watch it, and then I'll break it down. Zach, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea how this is a controversial call. This was all over Twitter. You see multiple Chargers lower their head and hit Harrison with their helmets. This is unnecessary roughness. If it's lower and it's on the chest, different story. We're seeing helmet-to-helmet contact.
And I do see the lowering of the head. I think the key here is look at the crown of the helmet. Look at it. Initiate that contact with Harrison Jr. I think that this angle is controversial because you can't see the contact in its entirety. When we switch to an alternate angle, we can see exactly where the launch connects with Harrison Jr. Watch Hart here as he comes in.
Watch 20 on the right side of the screen here.
That is a perfect pause that shows the launch of the crown of the helmet into the face mask of Harrison.
100%.
It absolutely was 100%. The correct call. I know that you agree.
I agree, and I want to point out to the audience as well, targeting is not a call in the NFL. That is only a college thing. But when you're looking at unnecessary roughness, you're going to look at the same things that college does look at when it comes to targeting. Only instead of targeting, it's roughing and unnecessary roughness. lowering the crown of the helmet, making helmet to helmet contact.
Leading
It's
with
going
the
to get
head.
called every single time. Yeah. Anything with the head's going to get called. We saw
Mhm.
that in the Super Bowl. Justin Reed did that to someone's helmet, got called for unnecessary roughness because it's the head. The NFL is taking a lot of different rules to keep players safe when it comes to their heads. And any contact with the head, it's gonna be unnecessary roughness. I don't understand how people on Twitter were calling that controversial.
So far, the refs are 2 for 3. They missed that Kyle Pitts call, but they have
I agree.
made the correct call in the Chiefs Texans game and that helmet to helmet call in Cardinals Chargers. We're going to move on to clip 2. This is Byron Young's controversial face mask here in the Sam Darnold Vikings game late in the game.
And before you play it real quick, I'm gonna pause it just real quick if you can.
Yep.
One thing I want to point out about why this is so big is because look at the score. It is a one possession game. The Vikings need to go down and make a touchdown. If their drive ends, the game is over. Go and continue on with that. We see we see a clear face mask there. At least it looks like a clear face mask. And every angle will tell you it is a face mask. But before I go and dog on the refs, I want to give them a chance to see if their point of view perhaps missed it. So this first angle here, this is the ref's point of view. Let's see if you can see the face mask in this point of view. And you do see an arm high up, and you see Darnold's face mask jerk back, and this is face mask. This is face mask, obviously, but you see face mask from the ref's point of view. I don't know what the ref is looking at here. This is a missed call. It gives 2 points to the Rams, forcing the Vikings to be down 2 scores and give the ball away. This is a game deciding call, perhaps. And it's absolutely, they messed up on this for sure.
Gotcha. So we're heading into the
Refs are
final
2 and
clip.
2 on this now.
50% accuracy on these controversial plays. All of these had their fair share of controversy throughout the season, but we're going to look at perhaps the most controversial call of the season. It was the Josh
AFC
Allen.
Championship, Josh Allen. This first clip, we're going to look at 2 angles here. This first clip, the camera shows Josh Allen's back, and then the second clip is going to show Josh Allen's front. Go ahead and play this first clip, and then pause it. So we see Allen, he's getting the ball, he tucks it. We see the body definitely going over the line, but right there is a great pause. The ball, and we'll see this in the second angle, the ball is in Josh Allen's right hand. The ball is above the number 7, not the number 1. And that's what determines the first down is where the ball is. Now, on this angle, we think the ball possibly made it. You can't see where the ball is definitively. This review is to determine if the spot on the field is wrong. So many people on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram have shown this and be like, his body clearly crosses the line. And it does. This is not a good angle to determine if the ball crossed the line because maybe it did, possibly did, but you can't see it definitively. So this angle cannot tell you where the ball is. We have to look at the front of Josh Allen to determine it.
I also think
I
that it's
also seen
important
a
to
lot of
note.
clips.
I also think it's important to note before we move on that this is to overturn a call. So there is the aspect of if
Yes,
there's not enough evidence, the call won't be
call on the
overturned.
field was short. Yes. I've also seen a lot of clips on Instagram and TikTok as well of this like imaginary line that was drawn that shows this. Great. Do you know who doesn't have the ability to see this imaginary line that you drew 2 days later? The refs making the decision in the moment. The only thing they have is this angle and this next angle that we're going to look at now. And really, you can kind of see the ball there. He doesn't even really get to it. Doesn't even look like he got to the line. So we really got to see this angle now. What you see in Allen is he's short of the line for a long period of time. And right here, you really can't see the ball. So
Yeah,
once
I'll go with
again, I
that.
think in this paused angle right here, he is still short. But there's a real quick that he
Shove.
makes. And that is him getting the first down, I do believe. But he gets, and so my analysis is that he should have gotten the first down. I think he did get the first down, but it's not this egregious conspiracy against the Buffalo Bills. He gets forward progress and maintains forward progress for about half a second. Actually, more like a quarter of a second. He gets there and then goes right back.
Here's
Watch
the
his
final
momentum.
thrust
He
right
gets in
there.
right before he goes back. Right there, basically. And with Chris Jones blocking it, kind of like I said on the last thing, if you can't see exactly where the ball is, it's so hard to overturn a call. I do think the refs missed this one. I do think Josh Allen made the first down, but it's such a hard thing to see. It's so hard to overturn a call, number one. And number two, especially when you're in the middle of a pile and can't see exactly where the ball is, very rarely is this call going to go overturned. Had they called it a first down, they would not have overturned it to make it not a first down. But the fact that they called it short on the field, they weren't going to overturn it.
And additionally, the
But
reason they called it
technically
short,
speaking, I do think he got the first down.
and the reason they called it short on the field is look at the position of the line judge. We just watched this guy's view. Josh Allen's back is facing him. He cannot make an accurate call on the football in the spot of the football, rather. And even in this view, Chris Jones blocks the crucial moment. So this is a very sneaky good Chris Jones play to stand right in front of the camera angle of the review.
Right. And again, Josh Allen only gets that forward progress to the first down line for a quarter of a second. So for a grand majority of the play, Josh Allen is behind the first down line. So I understand why the refs, with the naked eye that they had, hauled him short. And then when you go into it, I just don't think there's enough evidence to overturn the call. But I do think he did get the first right there. You see that little dive in, and then he's pushed back. That dive in here is where he gets the forward progress by an inch for a quarter of a second.
I can slow down your playback speed for you. Just for one final view of it. There's your thrust, and right as
He's
Jones's
not
head
there.
moves in the way,
Now
the
he's
ball
there.
crosses
Now
the
he's
line.
there, and now he's getting thrust back, just like he said.
And I do agree. I think that Josh Allen got the first down, but I also understand why the call was made that way. Because I think the key part here is, and maybe why the call is actually correct, is because of the not enough evidence in the review process. The NFL, when overturning a call, needs sufficient evidence to overturn it. We've had so many calls over the past 20 years of Tyler and I being alive and watching the NFL where perhaps the correct call was something other than on the field, but there just simply wasn't enough evidence. A fumble at the bottom of a pile with no cameras. Other additional calls, you don't have a good angle of a foot coming down in bounds or something like that. And that's an unfortunate case here where there simply isn't an eye in the sky that shows an above view of Josh Allen surging ahead for that first down for, tenth of a second that he did. And because of the lack of camera angles, the lack of evidence, the correct call is made here. The referees cannot, with certainty or with a decent level of certainty, make a call that Allen made the first down here because of the evidence we have.
100%. And if the ball was in his left hand, that angle of his back can absolutely tell you if he got the first down or not. And he definitely would have gotten the first down. But the fact that the ball's in his right hand and you can't see where the ball is, the angle to his back is not a good angle. They looked at that, they said they can't see the ball, and then they never looked at it again because it's not a good angle to determine if the ball crossed. This is the angle they primarily looked at. There's so much going on. I think he did get it, and I do think you do see the ball cross the line for a split second.
So for these controversial calls, our final tally is 2 out of 5 were correct on the field, whereas
Yes.
3 were wrong. But I don't know if they were. Only one of them was egregious, and that was the face mask one. This one and the other one that we determined was missed were not egregious.
Correct.
And that is going to conclude our first episode of the That's DPI podcast. We have a lot to talk about here in the offseason, free agency recap, the draft, and training camp stories, and all of those will be covered throughout this offseason. And so I hope you continue to tune into our short form content and our long full podcast episodes coming out on YouTube. But thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we hope you enjoyed the first episode of That's DPI.
Join us next week. We appreciate you guys watching.